From the steps of the California Capitol, Lawyer Monthly presents James Daniel Peters III, the man who decided to sue the California governor and all 977 school districts on behalf of 800,000 special education students. The governor has already settled his part of the case.
So I'm the dad of a kid with special needs. I've watched children who cannot speak at the age of 6 graduate from college with a diagnosis of autism. I've watched children struggle every day to do what most of us take for granted. The key is know your rules, know what you have to do. If you have an IEP, don't sign it. Go home, read it. Take a friend. Don't go by yourself. You know, I've been the executive director of a special education law firm for some 28 years. And in that time, I recognize every single parent who's trying to obtain the services for their kids. They cry. They have tears because they can't seem to get through the process. You've got an IEP, think about it, because that is a contract between you and the district. And unfortunately, it's not like you're going to get the services automatically. Oh, there's a saying, squeaky wheel gets the oil. I don't know what the saying is, but the idea is that sometimes districts aren't forthcoming. Most of them. There are people in your school district, your teachers, friends, and family. Take them with you. What we've done since I've been at the executive helm at this law firm is to make sure that during the pandemic when it hit, people that couldn't afford the services were able to obtain those services. So we had a rule go out that basically said we would never charge a retainer for any family that needed to be represented with the school district. And the question is, that's crazy. You know, how do you do it if you don't have any funds coming in to pay for it? It's simple. If we don't win, we don't get it. But when the coronavirus hit, we understood it affected everybody, middle class, lower class, upper class. All of a sudden, people that never had a problem had a serious problem. And what we've been able to do is take a little bit of that burden off. And that's where we are. So if you need help and you need assistance, you don't have to call us, but you need to call somebody to make sure they're there. You know, typical parents, special education parents, you know, there's not a difference. I mean, the kids with special needs struggle daily just to be a part of and to be included. And that's what we are. This is a nation in a world of inclusion. And so we want to, typical kids and kids with disabilities, they work well together. You know, people didn't understand that children with disabilities learn from typical kids. The old days, we used to take the kids, and as they're going back to school, they're going to try it again. You take the kids that have special needs, you put them down at the end of the room, and then you put them all in that classroom. And they're kind of forgotten by everybody else in the school. They call them self-contained classrooms, special day classes. You know, they're almost ruled out completely. Because what the experts have learned is that when you take these kids and you isolate them in there with other kids with disabilities and inappropriate behaviors, that's all they learn. And so over a period of time, working with the president and different cabinet members and so forth, we've come to understand that we take the children and we put them in the same program, in the same classroom, with appropriate supports. And what happened was the kids with typical behaviors were no longer afraid of the kids that have special needs. The kids with special needs, where they were picking up all those behaviors of the other kids running around and inappropriate behaviors, started to learn that when the other kids sat down, they were supposed to sit down. And so what the experts determined is that children learn from other children. The teacher's there and she's teaching the academics, but the fact of the matter is, the children were much more behaved and they also became a part. And this is what we learned, is that children learn from each other. And so when they're together with the appropriate supports, but parents are fooled. The school district will say, hey, listen, we have 31 kids in this classroom. Do you want your child to be one kid within those 31? But we have this really nice classroom down at the end of the hall. It's only got 8 kids in it and an aide. So if you take your child and you put them in that class, they're gonna thrive. It's a lie. Don't believe it. It's not true. So in essence, the children are learning from each other. But there's no segregation and there's no distance. And what happens is a parent will come in and see all of a sudden that the other kids are getting along. So the thinking is this. Previously, you take a child, you put them in that classroom, and then they go through the grades, and it's called special day class. But then when they graduated from school, they had no contact with typical people. They developed no friendship, no peers. And then when they got out of school, they found out there was no special education grocery store. There's no special education movie theater. And then they find out that the world is not separated, that it's inclusive. The kids that were involved with the typical kids and learned, those are the ones that started developing relationships. They got to go to the prom, they got to go to dances, they got to socialize. And the typical kids no longer were growing up being afraid of kids with special needs. So then we come into a true type of melting pot. We have kids that have a disability physically, and their mind is as sharp as can be. They were thrown in that classroom also. And then you have all these different groups. The idea is that we learn. I got a call from Judy Heumann. She was Assistant U.S. Secretary when Clinton was in office. And she says, Jim, I want you to come to Washington. We're doing this. It's really important. All right, Judy, no, you got to come. There's only 50 people. We get there and we find out there's a little speech. There's professors talking about inclusive education, and they've had this study, and they're going to the president to make sure he understands that kids, typical kids, learn better with kids with disabilities, and they learn together. So as they're talking, a young girl got up and they had showed us a video in the very beginning. And they said, everybody's concerned about the behaviors of kids with special needs. So they showed us a little girl with blonde hair, and she came in, she was 8 years old, and she pulled the little boy and pulled him out of the chair and took a seat. Oh, that's a terrible behavior. But what happened is they took that little girl and they worked with her. And so one of the college professors got down and said, I want my assistant to come up and explain this. And what she said was, I'm so happy to be here because I'm that little girl that you saw 14 years ago in that video. But I'm up on this stand now and I'm talking and I'm working. We have kids with autism and they're 6 years old and they can't speak. And one of them graduated college last year at Vanguard University. What I'm telling you is that we understand that the kids learning together. So when the kids go back to school, we don't want to regress in where we were with regard to inclusive education. Everybody wants to be a part so that we can. And this is the most important part. Supporting the teachers. You know, when our law firm or our people come into the classroom, the teachers are silently saying, we're so glad to see you. That child really needs help. But they can't often just speak like that at the IEP or speak openly like that. But when the child has a one-to-one aide, and there's the key, a one-to-one aide in the classroom to help support unobtrusively, then the teacher gets the assistance that they need in the classroom. So now your teacher is happy, she's able to help the kids, the kid is still working with the other kids. So we need to know that inclusive education is something else. When we go back to school, that we need to go back and make sure they start that. Now they're trying to isolate.